Hey, Caitlin, it's Sophie.
Sophie, how are you?
Good.
Great.
I'm just here early, just to make sure that Jenna gets all her questions answered. But I think we're all good to go.
Okay, perfect. We were going to share a slide at the beginning, just giving thanks to our sponsors for the program. Well, Jenna's hopping on now. I was going to see does she have a slide deck as well?
Yeah. Let's see here. I thought we already sent that, but should I send it to you directly?
Yeah, and then either that or if she wants to share them, that way she can scroll through her slides.
That's going to be easier.
Yeah, and I'll just allow her to do that. So once I stop sharing my screen with the sponsors and everything, and after Daniel introduces Jenna, then Jenna, you can just start sharing your screen if that works.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've made a few changes since the first draft, just a couple changes, so that'll be great.
Okay. Yeah, I can select so multiple participants can share.
You guys want to try that just to make sure I've got it looking right?
Yeah, let me try sharing my slide and then I'll stop and then you share yours. That way.
Okay.
I thought I had it up. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll have that up at the beginning. And then when it's after Daniel introduces you, I'll just do stop share and then you can share yours. So if you want to try that out.
Yeah, let me turn on my presentation mode here. Let's see.
Hi. Hey, Jenna.
Hi.
Hi. Is your haircut? Do you have a haircut?
Yes, she cut it pretty short last time.
Yeah, I like it.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody.
How are you, Kate?
Good. I'm doing really well. I heard Caitlin on the call or walking through everything, so it sounds like you guys are good to go.
Yeah. We're just testing it out. So, John, it looks like that's your screen share, and it looks really good on our end.
Okay.
I don't see any issues.
Can you guys see each of my slides over here on the left in addition?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Okay, so I can do, let me swap these displays really quick. Is it just one slide now for the whole screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe we'll do that. It probably looks a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, that looks good.
Awesome. Well, I'll stop share just so we can kind of go back now.
Okay.
All right, cool. How is everybody doing?
Great.
Hanging in there?
Yeah, how about you?
Oh yeah, just hanging in there, doing pretty good. We're pretty busy, so it's a good thing.
Good.
Yeah. And then you saw the list of 44 people, so hopefully there's new faces on there and maybe familiar faces on that list. So we're pretty happy with that turnout for today.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Daniel. I'm Jenna, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Jenna. I'll be introducing you today.
Sounds good.
Thanks for not sending over a 2-page bio.
Yeah. No one cares that much.
This is great.
So we'll just kind of hang out for a few minutes and
Yeah.
get started about noon. And then Caitlin, I see you are recording.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, and then towards the end, I think I mentioned my email, but towards the end, we're going to have Mark here. Just kind of mention that we do have Spanish speaking capabilities. So if anyone is interested in our services or has questions and would like, that's a possibility. And he'll of course present that in Spanish so that it's understood. And that way, if there are any questions, hopefully that will make folks feel comfortable to ask in that manner.
Great. Very well thought out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Maybe after this call, we would like to introduce you to Edgar Galicia with Central Avenue Betterment Association.
Okay.
He works with a lot of the business, most of them on Central Avenue, which are predominantly Latino-owned, Spanish-speaking businesses, but they do own their properties. And a lot of times for us, because we're a mainstream chamber and we're prepping out information about, whether it's a stormwater rate change or changes in appraisal values, that information doesn't always get to them. So having someone that can communicate that in Spanish will be fantastic. I could do it, but maybe that's too technical Spanish for me to talk to them. But having someone that can walk them through the technical pieces would be very important.
Sure. It's on my list. I should probably have gotten started during the shutdown, but other things took priority.
Yeah.
So.
And then Mark, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Kate Kershaw with the KCK Chamber, and I oversee our membership department. And so I've just been working with Jenna and Sophie on bringing this program together here at the Chamber. So thank you for being part of our call.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Mark's been with
I'm
PBS.
Caitlin, by the way. Sorry, I didn't introduce
Caitlin and
myself.
Yeah,
I just talking.
Caitlin, I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm so used to seeing your name at this point, but it's nice to
Yes.
meet you as well. I'm not sure we've met either.
And Mark, would you be able to do a presentation in Spanish? Like all in Spanish?
I mean, as long as I have some time to prepare for it.
Okay, I'm just thinking through again, as we also begin to expand our reach. It would be fantastic for us to do something in Spanish. A lot of times the hesitancy for us has been, even though I'm bilingual, we don't offer programming in Spanish. And so that at times becomes a barrier for us to really engage specifically with the Spanish speaking businesses.
Right.
Although we do funnel information their way through CABA, but it would be great if we could pepper in maybe once in a while, presentation in Spanish. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something we could put together.
Okay,
Definitely.
great. Thank you.
Or even with, Kate, we've talked about in the past some email blasts and things like that, just notifying
Yes.
people, hey, you should see this in the mail soon if you've got concerns. That might also be something that's even easier or faster for Mark to put together is we can put together like a little blob that's got it in English and Spanish for those folks to know.
Yes.
This is coming out, you have a deadline soon, you may see a date and not really understand what's coming or what's pending, so.
Right. Yes, we definitely would like to work with you guys on that. And I do recall that conversation. So that would be a good fit too.
Jenna, do you all do a lot of work here in Wyandotte County?
We do, yes.
Okay, great. So you're familiar with the heartburn that folks have had over, when the appraiser went out and increased the value, but then guess what? Your taxes also went up. And so folks have been pretty upset about that, coupled with the pending stormwater rate change.
Yep.
And then lay on top of that, this pandemic that folks are trying to get through. I mean, these property owners are getting hammered.
They are. It's some of the highest. It's not many folks know that. It's some of the highest taxes, maybe in the country, to be honest.
Right.
You're up there with states like Texas and Chicago,
Wow.
New York. Yeah, I mean, up to a 4% tax rate for Wyandotte, Kansas isn't probably something that most people realize until they get. And like you mentioned, that stormwater, the notifications kind of went under the radar for a lot of property owners, I think, when they just kind of mailed something out that said, hey, we're going to have a little meeting, don't worry too much. And you get your property tax bill and it's too late. That's the nature of our industry.
Well, we managed to kind of delay that some. We've had a lot of conversations with the UG, at least a year's worth, I would say, trying to get to a good solution that is not overbearing on the commercial property owners, but is also fair for the residential owners. Because as of right now, that rate isn't fair, NFM should not be paying the same rate as, the one home property owner.
Right. Yeah.
And I learned more about stormwater than I care to over the last year. So
Square footage for runoff and parking
yeah,
improvements.
impervious area. I got that one down. Yeah, it's all good stuff.
We need to do have music going. Remember that presentation from a couple weeks ago? Just music in the background for Dr. Price's presentation. That was so
I think we
nice.
can do that. Caitlin, can you do that from
Yeah.
your computer? That should be
There we
pretty easy
go.
to do.
It
Mood
was
music.
just it felt like you were kind of walking into something, although obviously virtually, but I was like, that's kind of cool.
I like that idea. It's a good idea.
It set a good tone for sure.
Allow me time to create a playlist because I don't know that I want to share what I have on my Spotify right now.
Just mix it
I
up.
can
Whatever you were
play-
listening to, Caitlin, last night.
Caitlin's our
gosh.
resident hipster, so we'll probably get some hipster music
I'm
going.
Jack
Like
White.
Classic rock. So you're going to hear a lot of, Tom Petty and
That's what I've been into lately.
Joe Cocker type from the 70s.
I have one of my guilty pleasures is yacht rock, and I get made fun of for it a lot, like classic 80s
Yep.
kind of ballads.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I know.
Doing some
it's
yard work or some housework to some
Yeah,
songs that you know.
right.
It's great.
I have a lot of folks entering right now, so.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry about the music, Caitlin. It was just,
Oh, okay.
yeah, don't worry about
That's a
it.
good idea, though. I like that idea.
Yeah, it was kind of cool.
Caitlin, can you change that to just one slide so that the rest of the stuff doesn't show? Should go to your
It looks
display
different on my.
settings. Mm-hmm.
Is that better?
Yep, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Daniel, you want to give it one more minute?
Am I ready, Kate? Okay, we're going to go ahead and kick off our chamber focus this afternoon. Caitlin or Kate, I know you'll monitor the waiting list and let folks in that are still trickling in. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Silva, and I'm the President and CEO of the KCK Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our Zoom call. We're excited to have you here. We're excited about today's presentation. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like for you to turn your attention to the slide that we are sharing, and want to give a big thank you to all the sponsors that continue to support our work. You know, every business, every person, every community has been impacted by COVID. The Chamber is no different. We also went through a stay-home order. We also saw different ways to continue our services to our members. And it's because of our investors and our sponsors that we're able to continue the work, you know, especially during these trying times. And, you know, our business owners are very resilient and have been very adaptable. And, you know, today we're going to talk about tax assessments. You know, property owners are dealing with that. They're dealing with increased valuations, increased taxes. At some point, we'll be dealing with an increased stormwater rate. And on top of that, they have to figure out how to keep the doors open during this pandemic. So kudos to all of you business owners and members that are out there for staying the course, you know, and grinding it out. It's not been an easy year, but you know, just know that the Chamber is here to support you. And for those of you that are not members of the Chamber, we hope that you will join at some point, hopefully this year. Feel free to get a hold of Kate Kershaw, who's our Partnership and Membership Director. And just a quick overview of the things that we focus on a daily basis. And again, we do this with support from our sponsors. We are heavily involved in public policy, great relationships with local and regional and national level. Small business, that's our main focus. 57% of our members are made up of employers who have 25 employees or less. Marketing, of course, is something we think we do very well, so we can assist your business in that way. Community impact, we're making a concerted effort to be a great partner to the entire community, not just the business community, because we understand that business doesn't exist in a vacuum, so you got to make sure that you're taking care of everyone. Leadership development, we're working hard to make sure that our board, on down to our programs, are reflective of this community. And we know that we do have to do work there in developing great leaders for the future. And of course, very excited about this new program that we'll be rolling out in about 2 weeks. We will be launching a full-fledged women's division here at the Chamber with programming designed by and implemented by women. And we were very excited about that program. So Hopefully that gets you excited. And for our members, again, thank you for your continued support. At this point, I would like to introduce our speaker today. Her name is Jenna Reyes, and she's the Director of Real Estate with Property Valuation Services. Jenna Reyes has extensive experience in the valuation of hospitals and complex healthcare properties, including psychiatric, oncology, surgical, dialysis centers, as well as hotels, apartments, retail, offices, and other commercial real estate and personal property types. I think you got it all covered there, Jenna. Jenna has presented and testified to property valuation at local, state, and litigation hearings across the U.S. She has been with Property Valuation Services for 13 years and is obviously currently the Director of Real Estate at their corporate office in Southern Overland Park. Jenna, really excited about today's topic. The floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. And I'm going to go ahead and let me know. Hopefully you all can see my screen here as we talk about hopefully what's an important topic for you all and give you some information as business managers, property owners, even tenants about how COVID has impacted your tax assessments. As I know, that's a pretty big topic that's going on right now in the world. And a lot of questions. How does it impact me this year versus next year? We're going to go through how the basics of valuation compared to tax and what each one is, just quickly. We're going to go through some specific industries that may be affected by COVID-19. And then we're going to talk about how do you put that into action? What do you do that can lower your tax assessment and pay a lower tax liability for your property taxes? We'll go through specifics as well about Kansas, but also Missouri, being that it's our neighbor here. And then we'll go through a little bit about maybe if you need to hire an expert and when that might look like something that's a smart idea for you to do. So let's start first with just Property Tax 101, some basics about how property tax works itself. So property tax is made up of two different components, as I'm sure a lot of you know. You've got the valuation and then you've got the tax rate. Those two items come down to your property tax bill that you're going to get annually. Your valuation is a fluctuating component on your annual property tax bill. That's something that is set by the county tax assessor. It's going to be based on your building type, age, potentially the revenue that it's generating for you and your tenants, your rents, market factors, in addition to your land. It's a dynamic factor of your property tax bill. So it's certainly something that can be reviewed, protested, and changed each year. Your tax rate, on the other hand, again, a fluctuating component typically, hopefully not as often as your valuation. We like to see there's a little bit of a flatter trend, but it's something that can definitely bounce from year to year depending on the needs of the municipality and what's voted on by your local officials who are set your tax rate. That's typically and should be based on budgets from primarily school, but also county, city, fire, your hospital, library district. All of those things go into your actual tax rate. And this is a static component. It's not something typically, while you can be involved in the process, as Daniel mentioned, with the stormwater fee or flat assessment, this is not something that an individual taxpayer can receive a notice and go protest their actual tax rate. So that's why it's important to take a look at your valuation. So let's talk about how is property tax actually calculated with these items. Your property tax is simply your assessed value or taxable value multiplied by your tax rate and then adding in a couple of other components. So your local tax assessor's job is annually, or in the state of Missouri every other year, to estimate your fair market value. What is that property reasonably going to sell for? The price at which property will sell on the open market, typically with exposure to the market, between a willing and informed buyer and an unwilling and informed unrelated seller. So we're not talking about a foreclosure, an auction here, we're talking about an arm's length transaction on the open market. And sometimes this can get dicey, and knowing how to explain whether it's local comparables or REIT transactions or large multi-property national sales compared to a single property transaction becomes very important. Then what the assessor does is takes that fair market value and implies what we call an assessment ratio, which is going to arrive at your assessed value. Another word would be your taxable value. Another word for your fair market may be your appraised value. In the state of Kansas, your commercial assessment ratio, you're taxed at 25% of your fair market value. For residential, it's 11.5%. In the state of Missouri, commercial is taxed at 32%, of its fair market value and 19% for residential. So you're not taxed at that full fair market value. It is on a percentage of that, and that's where you multiply your tax rate. Let's talk about how it's collected. Most of you know, especially if you're a homeowner, that you're going to get a tax bill at the end of the year that's due. So the annual assessed value is provided by the tax assessor's office to the tax collector, or often called the treasurer's office in the state of Kansas. The tax collector, the treasurer, then takes the approved tax rate for all jurisdictions, which the collector does not set. They're merely an entity that takes information about your value from the assessor and information from the localities about the tax rate. Again, that's going to include city and municipal tax, county taxes, state, education, healthcare, fire, numerous other rates. And then they're going to potentially add special assessments, or special assessments are typically a flat rate fee that is not a percentage of your assessed value. So a stormwater fee, for example, depending on the location you're in, it may be a trash or a fire fee, things like that. And your annual tax bill is then mailed by your collector, and taxes are collected back in their office and distributed to the appropriate jurisdiction based on their budgets, based on their rates. So let's talk about valuation. Let's go back and talk about how exactly the tax assessor estimates that fair market value. This is the most important component for a taxpayer, because this is the part that they're going to challenge and can change. So three approaches to value in appraisal: the cost approach, the sales comparison approach, and the income approach. And in a second, we'll go over in more detail how you would apply each of these, and then how COVID-19 has impacted each one of these. So the cost approach is typically, or is simply, what would it cost to, if I wanted to replicate this property, purchase land, construct a building, and then we'll deduct depreciation so that that asset is similar to the subject. What would it cost me to rebuild this property? That's one way of estimating value. Second would be sales comparison approach. Pretty self-explanatory there. You're going to utilize nearby recent comparable property sales with some adjustments to determine what your property would sell for. And then the third is the income approach, which is usually the most complex and most utilized really by county assessment offices. And that's going to estimate what is a property buyer or an investor willing to pay, knowing that they're going to get a cash flow in the future, and plus the return of their assets. So what are they willing to pay today in order to get that monthly or annual cash flow in the future? You're going to kind of discount that back. So what are the pros and cons of each of these? Where would we use these, and which different buildings or property types should we use each of these? The cost approach can be very difficult on a very old property. If you have something that's built in the 60s or the 70s, it becomes very subjective as to how much depreciation you should be applying, because it comes down to the condition of the building, how much that depreciation, that wear and tear, designs and technology. Those are subjective components that one person may think are detrimental to a property or a building in a greater capacity than somebody else may think. So that becomes difficult on older buildings. Typically, we try to use the cost approach where we believe it's the most realistic approach when you're dealing with maybe an owner-occupier, like a hospital, a specific property that maybe it doesn't sell very often. There isn't a revenue stream attributed to just the real estate components. That's when you'd want to apply the cost approach. But in reality, it really could be applied to just about any property type out there. Sales comparison approach, again, is dependent upon market data. So if you don't have great comparable sales, or perhaps you're in an area where your type of property just hasn't sold in a few years, then it's not a good indication of what market value is to look around the market and see what they're selling for if they aren't selling. It's also difficult in the sales comparison approach and the income approach to remove what we would call business or intangible value. And what we mean there is we are always looking in property tax appraisal to isolate brick, mortar, and land. So we don't want to include the value of the business or the operations that are going on inside that property. Let's take a hospital example. We don't want the doctors and nurses inside, the services they're providing, any of the contracts, insurance, Medicare, or Medicaid, Any of those components are intangible or business value, and we don't want to include them in the real estate assessment, so we want to strip those out. And the sales comparison and income approach can make that a bit dicey when something is sold as a business unit, or what we call a going concern, the business inside the building. So stripping that out can have difficulties in the sales comparison approach. Same thing in the income approach. It's ideal if you've got market data and there are several components to look at. You're going to need rental rates, capitalization rates, vacancy and occupancy information, expense ratios or expense per square foot. So it's a lot of data to acquire, and if it's not out there, it makes the income approach less reliable or more difficult. It's also difficult to remove that business component in it. Hotels and motels, for example, have a very difficult time with a flagship on the property. How much does that Marriott or Hampton name carry in terms of the valuation? And it needs to be stripped out so that we can really just value the real estate, the actual building itself, and what the rooms alone are generating, and that can be difficult. So which one is most appropriate for my property? We talked about this a little bit already, but the cost approach typically we'll see, and these are examples, it's definitely not all inclusive, but cost approach we'll see a lot on hospitals, senior living, an auto dealership, a bank, a golf course, large parking structure, or a fitness center. Those are very specific property types, and you're probably not going to have either just income from that building component alone, and you may not see a lot of sales, or you may not be able to strip out the business versus real estate component. So it's better to use the cost approach on these property types. The sales comparison approach is often used, as homeowners will know, on residential homes, warehouse and industrial property, vacant land, offices. The income approach, very appropriate for anything that's leased. So you're talking offices and medical office buildings, multifamily apartments, townhomes, retail, again, hotel, motel. You purchase those in order to derive an income stream. So those are the properties you'd want for your income approach. And a lot of those being leased, you can isolate the income from the actual building itself rather than any business that's going on inside. So what we call in the business, a lot of us do, the fourth approach to value is called the equity comparison approach, or just equity for short. It's the idea that a single payer of taxes shouldn't be paying any more than their peers in the industry. So the tax assessor should be valuing all similar properties in a similar manner, given adjustments. So what that means, it's also often referred to as fair and uniform. It's an actual requirement that a state or a tax assessor must review similar property types within their county, their jurisdiction, to be sure that that class and industry is fair across the board. Another thing that we often see tax assessors do is what we call chasing a sale, or if a single property sells for a value that's typically higher than what it's on the tax roll for, the assessor will simply change the value of that one property, which is typically illegal and is not what they should be doing. If a house in a neighborhood sells, you need to look at the entire neighborhood and adjust all market values for that sale, not simply that one house that's sold. And that goes for commercial properties and as well. It can be used as appeal evidence, the fair and uniform alone. If you have no market evidence, sometimes you can go in with an equity or fair and uniform argument and point out that you are paying a higher tax liability than your peers in the industry, and that's not fair. You should be changed. Your assessment should be changed to account for your value in relation to theirs. And the other component is it's very important to perform these analyses yourself. The county assessor is already setting the values. So if you're simply taking their idea of the comparables in their industry, you're really comparing their information to their information. So go out and find who you think your property's competitors or peers are in the industry, find the county's tax assessment on those, and really do your own comparison before you look solely at the counties to see if they're missing any comparables. So let's look at the equity approach, just break it down just a little bit more, the how-to. You're essentially, like I said, you're taking the county's assessments on each of these, not their market value, simply what the county has said their valuation is for this year, and comparing it to your own. So the first thing is you want to find comparable properties. And if you're a tenant or a landlord, you probably know in your neighborhood or your surrounding county who your competitors are or how comparable the buildings and the properties are to yours based on size, age, location, condition, occupancy, use, renovations, things like that. And it's important to try to stay near the subject property so that you each have a similar, hopefully, land assessment and exposure on the market. The next thing you want to do is go to a county's website or any of their public record information to find the current assessment for those comparable properties. And then you need to apply some adjustments. If something's a substantial amount older, they've had a renovation compared to your subject, you need to alter your comparables so that they're more in line with your subject property before you approach the county for a reduction. So those are kind of the ins and outs of basics of property tax there. Let's kind of dive in a little bit more into the impact of COVID-19 specifically and how that's impacted certain industries. As everyone's probably aware at this point, we're deep into this recession and it's not going to go away anytime soon in terms of economic changes. So we've seen Ruby Tuesdays is the latest, for example, to claim bankruptcy. We're seeing closures across the board for retails and REITs investing is changing. So we've got changes in living arrangements, multi-generational households coming together. We're having problems with workplace re-entry because of childcare and schools being closed down. Small businesses are already declining 20% since January and decreasing revenue, and that's sure to increase by year end. And then consumer behavior changes are going to expedite, how people consume and purchase items and what it is that they're consuming. So that's definitely going to have a lasting effect on properties that either sell or provide services, which is just about everyone. So some of the things that are impacting property value from COVID-19, we've got, from a landlord perspective, a loss of tenants, or perhaps your tenants are still in place, but they haven't been able to pay their rent. This is definitely going to impact property tax assessment next year. The increase in inventory from either closures from offices, retail, restaurants, things like that. Anytime you've got additional supply, you're going to have a decrease in your rental rates. So you're probably not going to be able to sell your property today for what you could have a year ago from now. And that's only going to perpetuate into the future with COVID-19. You've got increased fixed costs. You've got capacity limitations and PPE requirements, possibly testing depending on your inventory, your industry, testing for your employees. These are all increased fixed costs that, again, aren't going away anytime soon. They should be built into a business model as a true expense that you wouldn't have had in prior years. And then just in general, less access to capital and the overall market risk, especially we've got an election coming up that really may throw things in a number of different directions, depending on what happens in the next 3 to 4 months. So let's talk a little bit about how it's important to isolate 2020 calendar year versus 2021 and how that impacts your property tax assessment. So your valuation in the state of Kansas and Missouri, and really in most states across the country, is based on the manner in which it sits, how your property is standing on January 1st of that year. So for 2020 tax year, counties were looking at data from 2017, 18, and 19, sales, income, rents, things like that, in order to value your property on January 1st, because COVID largely did not exist in the United States in a full capacity as of January 1, 2020. Therefore, the tax bills you are going to get this fall and winter are going to be based on market conditions from 2019 and a year, 18 months prior. The big difference, that means that January 1st, 2021 is going to dictate what we pay in taxes next year. So your 2021 tax bill should reflect COVID-19, mandatory shutdowns, drops in rents, sale prices. You're going to be using all of that information from the 2020 calendar year. And there's sure to be some pushback from the county tax assessors. They are likely going to argue it was a one-time or a limited scope situation. We've already seen in the state of Kansas, some of you may have received questionnaires from the county appraisers asking for your increase in expenses or your decrease in rents. And they've isolated really like a 6-week time span that was the most intense portion of COVID-19 shutdown. And in our opinion, that won't be enough. You know, you need to take this entire year and what's been going on, you know, rather than just a snippet of the period in time in which we were shut down. So that's an important distinction between January 1st, 2020 and 21. Let's look at a few of the industries that have been hardest hit as well. I don't think there's a single industry that hasn't been impacted by COVID-19, and that's really going to play out into your property tax values as well. You know, restaurants, for example, the National Restaurant Association has said $120 billion was lost in revenue for that industry between just March and May, and they're expecting $240 billion by the end of the year. There are consumer habits that are changing. It's grocery over eating out right now, and it's really taken a dramatic turn in on-site premise eating and dining, full service, compared to picking it up and taking it home to the family. That probably won't change. In most people's mind, they don't believe until a vaccine or public safety has been fully addressed. Hotels have already lost $46 billion in room revenue since mid-February when COVID really hit in. STR and tourism economics are producing, you know, 50% loss in revenue for the year. That's tremendous. And if you're looking at the valuation next year in 2021. Same thing with job losses, you know, that in itself and trying to recruit staff or train staff is going to be difficult. Individual hotels and operators are expecting occupancies below 20% for hotels, even by the year end. So that's tremendous for the hotel industry. For retail, obviously, you know, consumer habits are just changing dramatically. You know, retail traffic was already down 30% year over year by the second week of March. And we didn't even have full shutdowns in most states across the United States. So some projections are showing that the US having 20% less retail space by the end of the pandemic. That's monumental. You know, consumer behaviors are likely to become permanent. Online shopping and large retailers who were already set up or quickly adapted for, you know, pickup rather than in-store purchases are also, it's going to decline what people are actually purchasing. And it's going to be affected by things like delivery costs, digital online grocery orders, things like that. People are cooking at home. It's going to affect the grocery industry as well. And then brand erosion, the preference for a brand, if it's not on your shelf, is quickly out the door when you're talking in a pandemic and, you know, health safety. For healthcare and surgical, we saw a tremendous loss in revenue, and that was largely in the surgical field due to elective surgeries. The cancellation, surgical cancellation rescheduling rate was 88% nationwide in April. 70% reduction in the number of new surgeries scheduled. That's just tremendous. We at PBS have several of these clients nationally, and we saw just a tremendous decline that was not picking up as of the end of the month in July. Typically the cancellation rate is around 25%, gives you any idea of what's going on. So the other, you know, opening ORs is also something that could be dictated depending on the winter COVID cases by the government as well. So there's certainly some unknowns out there. It's estimated that U.S. hospitals lost $50 billion a month during COVID-19. So that's definitely going to have an impact in the healthcare industry. Office is obviously a hard hit with the work from home. We're seeing consumer habits change in that aspect as well, which is companies are becoming more comfortable with technology. They're largely going off-site for an unknown number of months or even permanently with their staff. In the Kansas City 4- and 5-star offices, speaking locally, were hit the hardest. They had increasing vacancy, you know, up to 11% compared to, you know, 9.5% the year prior. It's a little bit better for Kansas City 2- and 3-star. You know, the forecasted is occupancy around 9 to 10% compared to 6% year prior. Entertainment, we've got questions in ice skating rinks, bowling alleys, arcades, golf courses. What will all of these look like in the future with COVID-19? Movie theaters and theaters in general, will those be reopened, in what capacity? How will those work? Apartments and multifamily, you know, students staying home from college and doing online classes. We've got rents falling in college towns and near college campuses, which is having a big impact in the market. Preference, you know, balconies and larger units with open air spaces. That's no longer a preference to have shared amenities in the building. We'll see if that changes when confidence comes back in the overall general health of the public. Same thing with high rises. High rises in larger cities are losing rents or renters at a higher rate than lower facilities, which is something that we haven't seen before. Typically those have been quite in demand. And the same thing with size, multi-generational households needing more work for multiple parents or adults to be working in the home as well as children. So it's gone across the board. We talked a little bit about Kansas City office market here. You'll notice that the forecast, and this is from CoStar, it's their annual market report. These are the red lines are what we're talking about for the January 1 of 2020 and January 1 of 21. And as you can see, vacancy rates here are increasing. We've got still a tremendous decline in the market growth for office. And that's a large component of, downtown Kansas City. I know there are quite a bit of business types, but it's usually indicative of what's going on in the market. So how do we apply everything that I just listed to lowering your property taxes? That's what's most important. So let's look at the different industries that we already went over and talk about how we can do that for each different approach. So restaurants, again, you're usually using an income approach, maybe a sales comparison model with decreased revenue and the mandated closure of restaurants. You are going to have some factors in your income approach that should yield a lower tax assessment in the 2021 tax year. You've also got increased costs and decreased capacity that should be going on into the future, most likely. Same with retail, decreased rents, increased vacancy. You're going to have a higher capitalization rate for your income approach. Those are all going to drive your appraised value down for a retail facility. Sales comparison, we're just now really starting to pick up in the properties that are on the market or will sell for general retail. And with the closures from larger companies, like I mentioned, Ruby Tuesdays, JCPenney, some of those type large facilities that are closing hundreds of stores across the United States, we'll get a really good idea of what these actual sale prices would look like. Income approach for your hotel or motels as well. You're going to have a drop in occupancy. Your ADR and RevPAR for the year in 2020 will all be down. That's going to, create larger challenges for limited service compared to full service. We're seeing, resort and leisure come back fast at a faster rate than a limited service hotel. Hospitals and surgicals, again, you could apply, same thing here for a nursing facility or a senior living, for example, but in the cost approach, you can apply additional depreciation or what we call obsolescence, which is going to drive down the value of your cost approach for hospital and surgical. For surgical facilities that are often leased, similar to medical office buildings, same thing, utilize decrease in rents, greater amount of expenses are all going to drive down your income approach for a surgical facility. Offices and medical offices are a similar way, and in decreased rent, people aren't going to be looking for, 50,000 square foot office buildings, 30,000 square foot office buildings, most likely in the immediate future, even the next 18 months with work from home looking like a severe possibility for a large percentage of the workforce. Same with senior living facilities, as I mentioned, either in the income approach or the cost approach. You could be applying external or functional obsolescence, which is really to say that a senior living facility has to adapt to changes in how they, shared rooms or shared facilities, open and shared amenities like dining and entertainment, theaters, ballrooms, libraries, things like that in senior facilities are going to have to be altered potentially given COVID-19 if it sticks around for a while. It's a portion of the population that's severely impacted. So minimizing their risk is going to change how you build a senior living facility, which means if you have one that was built in the 80s or the 90s or even 10 years ago, it may be obsolete at this point. It may be need a severe amount of restructuring in order to be safe and profitable in the future. That decreases your appraised value. How do we put these into play? What do I do to use everything that we just talked about to appeal my assessment? It's going to vary a little bit from Kansas to Missouri, but we'll go through each. The annual deadline in Kansas is in spring. That's considered your spring informal deadline. And it's what I'd consider your more important or your more profitable, advantageous to go after. It's typically the middle to end of March. That can fluctuate depending on the county that you're in. but you're going to have an assessment or evaluation notice that's mailed from the county tax assessor. Keep a lookout for that. If you don't get it, you can typically go online and request a copy from your local assessor. It's going to tell you what your valuation is this year. Sometimes it lists last year as well, so that you can see a change. It's also going to list your classification to make sure that if you were listed as residential last year, you still are, and they haven't moved you to commercial, for example. Again, it's mailed in February or March. You have 30 days to file what we call an informal appeal. It is a form, there is no fee. You file it to the county assessor, and that kicks off your appeal period. And we'll go into a bit more detail after this. But the second opportunity in the state of Kansas, it's specific to Kansas, is what's called a payment under a protest or PUP. If you miss the spring deadline, or perhaps you purchased a property after that deadline and you weren't able to file in spring, you have a second opportunity in December when you file or when you pay your first installment of property taxes. Taxes are paid both in December and May in the state of Kansas. So you can file this ideally in December. You can also still file with your second payment in spring. That's May of the following year. Again, PUP or payment under protest. If you your taxes are paid through an escrow account, something you can coordinate with the tax assessor and whoever is making your payment. Appeal procedures itself, once you've filed either a PUP or your informal, in the informal appeal period in spring, you'll typically get a notice from the tax assessor that gives you a meeting date with the county appraiser. You'll either talk to them nowadays, probably over Zoom or possibly in person. You'll meet with them in their office and you'll present your evidence, the cost, income, or sales comparison that we've talked about. If there's been any changes or damage to your property, you have deferred maintenance, something like that, here's your chance to point that out. And you are presenting your opinion of value and your evidence to support that. The county should take that into consideration and review their records. They will issue a written decision. When I say written, it's typically 5 or 10 words tops. It's not very verbose. So, but they will give you 30 days from that decision to continue on with your appeal in the state of Kansas. And you have two options to go further from the informal level in Kansas. You've got 30 days to file either to small claims or what we call BOTA, or Board of Tax Appeals. Some of you may remember COTA, Court of Tax Appeals is what it used to be called. Residential commercial property owners with a property of $3 million or less are able to go to the small claims division. Otherwise, if it's a commercial property greater than $3 million in value, you file to BOTA. The second level appeal procedure in Kansas, again, small claims, you file a form, you need to accompany a small fee. You will be given another hearing. It's very informal as well, but it should be with what we call a hearing officer, somebody who is an attorney, is familiar with the law and appraisal technique, and often an appraiser themselves. They will hear your evidence compared to the county appraiser's evidence and make a ruling. If you are going to BOTA, Board of Tax Appeals, you'll need to engage an attorney. There is a filing fee, and often in the state of Kansas, in order to really secure a reduction of BOTA, you're going to have to go out and get an independent third-party appraisal report, or have some sort of a property tax expert on your side. For this second level of appeals is typically recommended. Let's go to Missouri. So Missouri is a little bit different, but being next door, I'm sure some of you have properties there as well. Revaluation cycle in Kansas is annually, whereas in Missouri it's every 2 years in odd years. So the valuations in 2020 should have stayed unchanged from 19 in Jackson, Clay, Platte, all of the Missouri counties. They will change or should change in 2021. They should be reviewing, all the assessors should be reviewing data from the past couple of years to issue a new value in tax year 2021. They're typically issued around March or April. Gives you about 30 to 60 days to file an appeal. And this varies from county to county, so you just want to kind of keep an eye on that. In the state of Missouri, if your valuation is going to increase by 15% or greater, they should physically inspect your property. And I'm sure some of you have heard or did hear in the past couple of years about the colossal issue they had in Jackson County. They shouldn't be using drones or aerial GPS data just to visually inspect from afar. You've got an appeal opportunity as well. It's very easy in the state of Missouri. Sometimes you can call informally and discuss with the county appraiser, but typically in a reval year, it's so busy, that you need to file a formal appeal to the local Board of Equalization, or the BOE. They will hold hearings typically starting the first Monday in July. And your second chance opportunity, once you file to the local board, and you must file to the local board in order to go to the State Tax Commission in the state of Missouri. That would be your second opportunity. Missouri passed a Senate bill earlier this year that did have some implications for property tax. Governor Parsons signed it in July, and it is going to address some issues that have concerned property owners in Missouri, one of which the burden of proof for valuation increase 15% or greater is now on the tax assessor. Again, big issue that was a hot topic in Jackson County in the last revow 2 years ago. Also, it has to have that on-site physical inspection for any increase greater than 15%. So even if the county says you've been wrong for 10 years and all I'm doing is correcting it, so your value went up 20%, they need to come with some evidence to the table. So lastly, we've talked about how these things can be detailed and complex, nuanced. If you need assistance, sometimes it's best to hire a firm itself. And that's really what my company does. We do real and business personal property at PBS. We collect valuations, we do a detailed complex analysis with market information. We file all of your appeal paperwork, we track correspondence. If you get a questionnaire in the mail that asks you for information, you send it to us, we can take care of that for you. We file all appeal documentation, we attend all hearings, we present all evidence. So you just sit back, we keep you informed of the process. That goes for business personal property as well. In the state of Kansas, it's largely exempt. It has been for anything purchased after 2006, but in Missouri, it's still taxed, and you do have to file an annual return each spring for business personal property, your furniture, fixtures, equipment inside your building. That too can be argued, and a lot of property owners are overpaying there too. So if you have any questions about that, reach out to an expert and ask. We may be able to look at your asset detail, what you've been filing for inventory, supplies, file appeals and handle the negotiations for you. We work in all 50 states. So if you've got concerns or questions in states beyond just Kansas and Missouri, after this webinar, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you. We subscribe to not only tax assessor and government databases across the country, but we also subscribe to CoStar LoopNet and other market subscription locations that give us market data that isn't available if you're just providing a Google report or talking to neighbors trying to accumulate information for income approach or sales comparison approach. And we're all inclusive. Again, so the other component we have of this, and I'll introduce my associate, Mark Kinch, here for a second. Mark is been in our office for a number of years, probably roughly 20 years. And if you have any questions now, or if you're interested in services, we do have bilingual capabilities. So I know that can be a deterrent in this industry, and we're here to help you. Kind of turn it over to Mark for just a second.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my audio was cutting out for a second there. So, yeah, so as Jenna mentioned, or I think she mentioned because it cut out for me, we also offer our services in Spanish. So, para los que hablan español, también podemos asistir con cualquier preguntas o asistencia que necesitan con sus impuestos sobre propiedad. Así que solo necesita llamarnos o nos puede contactar vía correo electrónico, y también te podemos asistir en español si prefieren o se sienten más cómodo con alguien que habla español.
All right, so now I've got a couple of minutes left. If anyone has questions, feel free to reach out. We can answer those for you. And then again, contact information should be available if you have concerns about your specific property after this. We're happy to take a look for you. Anybody have any questions for us?
Jenna, it looks like there's a number of questions in the chat. I'm not sure, Mark, did you already address all of those?
I believe I did. There were a couple questions, and I tried to answer those as they came in. So
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, or if you have questions that you think of, feel free to shoot them our way, and then we'll make sure that Jenna gets them. Want to give Jenna a round of applause. Thank you very much for your presentation. Great information. So really appreciate the content.
Great. Well, thank you for having us. Like I said, reach out. I know it can be, and it does look, just looking at the chat, if you do have any questions that didn't get answered there, feel free to reach out to Mark and I, and we can help you out with those, certainly. Free of charge, obviously.
Yeah, and we'll also be posting this presentation on our website. So I know there's a lot of information. So if you want to revisit some of those slides, please link onto our website.
Thanks for the program.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.